It is now my true pleasure to introduce Brandon Owens, Technical Director for GE Energy Consulting, who will share the latest industry insights and view from GE's global market analysis. And Brandon brings 20 years of energy sector experience and leadership, including deep expertise in research, analytics, strategy, and communications. His research has been published in multiple industry-leading journals, and as a keynote speaker and top expert witness, he is often cited in periodicals, including the New York Times and USA Today. So, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us here today. We very much look forward to your insights.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for that kind introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and speak with you all today. I don't know that we've presented to this crowd before, so it's a pleasure to be here and give our perspective. So what I'm going to do is kind of give you the latest industry view from GE's perspective. In December, we released a white paper called Reimagining Our Electricity Future. If you want to check that out, you can Google it. It should pop up for you. But a lot of the information here is from that document. And what we did is, step back, take a broad view of the global power industry, and think a little bit about some of the trends acting on the industry and how we think that's going to evolve over the next 15 years. One of the points I want to make real quick before we get started is about energy use in human development. So in human development, this is the UN's development index. So we're talking about education, longevity, health, things like that. When you look at that on a country-by-country basis, it's pretty clear that there's a positive correlation between energy use and human development. So this is all forms of energy, not just electricity. So as we use more energy, that's generally a positive thing for the world. So the reason I say that is there's a lot of pushback a lot of times against increasing energy use, increasing electricity use, the environmental impacts, et cetera. Our core proposition is that more energy is a good thing. We just need to make sure we do it in a way that's sustainable. So we've heard a little bit about some of these trends today. These are the big four trends that we see impacting the global power industry, and I'll go one by one. The first is decarbonization, right? All the climate issues, the climate policies, the movement into the marketplace of low carbon technologies, particularly wind power, and all the associated policies really have shaped the global power market over the last 10 years. The next piece is digitization. Ethan talked about this a little bit in response to a question. This is a big driver and a very big trend for us. This is adding a digital layer to all of the energy assets, not just the new emerging one, but also the legacy assets as well. We're seeing digitization, IT, start to penetrate energy at a very accelerated pace and in new ways. And we think this is going to drive and shape the landscape in the future. The other piece is decentralization. So this is distributed energy resources, microgrids, distributed storage, things like that. Again, this is a trend that's been on the rise for we've been talking about distributed power for a very long time. We've actually seen it move the market in the last 10 years or so. In 2014, we published a report called The Rise of Distributed Power. You may want to check that report out. We sort of dissect what some of the big drivers are for that. And the other piece more recently is electrification. So electrification of transportation, in some cases electrification of industry, but it's the spread of electricity across the global economy. We're seeing an acceleration of that as well. So those are the four big drivers that we think are really transforming the global power landscape today. So this is the obligatory GE positioning slide, but we really see that the power system is transitioning from what was a legacy centralized system, high carbon content, not smart or really not IT integrated, hub and spoke model to something that's more distributed, digitally enhanced, and low carbon. I'll give you my position on this. We talk a lot about distributed solar technologies and the rise of microgrids and mini grids and things like that. I really don't see that as an either-or proposition. I don't think the system globally is moving towards a distributed system. I think where we're headed towards is a hybrid system, a system that has combinations of central grids and microgrids, and a combination of physical assets and digital assets, all integrated together. That's where we think the power system is moving towards. So it's not an either-or proposition. Okay, this is really interesting, though. So if we look at these are global power plant orders. On the left side is over the last decade. So this is history. This has already happened. So if we look at the last decade, the total orders are about 300 gigawatts per year, and that's the ranking. So coal steam came on top, wind turbines second, wind, solar was just starting to emerge. If we fast forward over 10 years, now this is the GE outlook, major transformation. Really the rise of solar is the big news, but also notice wind that had done very well in the last decade is going to also pick up steam. Gas turbines are going to be more installed as a companion to the variable energy resources, so they still have a real important role to play. And coal steam plants, really the development there is going to be focused on large baseload power in the developing world. So that's our view. You know, the one place where you could argue or have a robust discussion is the role of energy storage. We have it increasing. I've seen some scenarios that have it, you know, jumping up 400, 500, 600. It remains to be seen what happens there, but that's the real wild card. But the point of this is not just what's happening as the technologies kind of trade places. It's that notice there's still a role for all technologies. And again, this is another GE theme. When we talk about the emergence of new technologies, we really don't see the legacy technologies receding into the background. In fact, if you fast forward to 2030, let me see if I can remember the numbers, you still in IEA scenario have fossil fuels accounting for 75% of energy consumption. So these legacy technologies aren't going anywhere. And in fact, in some cases, they're going to be upgraded through digital enhancement and made stronger and made more flexible. So they will continue to have a very important role to play. Okay, here, what I'm showing here is total additions over the next decade by country. So this kind of gives you a sense, this is driven by electricity demand increases and GDP and population increases. And then we've broken this down by technology. So this is gigawatts added or subtracted to each of the power systems ranked. So this is where the opportunities are, okay? China, India, US, Brazil, Indonesia, Vietnam, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Iran, Turkey, Bangladesh and its neighbors, and Egypt. If you guys want to go hunt for opportunities for clean energy technologies in the developing world, this is your target list. So let's talk a little bit about how we globalize at GE and how we go after some of these opportunities in the developing world. We have found that it's difficult to supply electricity equipment in a particular country as a global company. You really need to localize. And let me tell you what that means from our perspective. It means committing to each of these markets individually. It means understanding these markets. It means investing time, local presence, getting knowledgeable about these markets. You may need to meet localization requirements, whether it's manufacturing, employment, training. This is probably my biggest recommendation would be consider local partners for distribution, for joint ventures, for technology development. They have the local knowledge, they have the contacts, they understand the culture, they understand the system. Of course, this is a no-brainer. You're going to want to leverage financing, favorable financing opportunities where available. We've sold into projects that are getting ECA financing. And it's always important to be part of the local solution. So a lot of these countries have challenges, whether it's from a weak grid, whether they have infrastructure challenges, whether they have unemployment challenges, whether there are local environmental challenges. Don't just go there to sell equipment, plug in and be part of the solution. And every place does things differently. So it takes a lot of creativity, patience. These are multi-year commitments you need to make to specific countries, and persistence. One of the things that we've done in a lot of countries is engage in demonstration projects to prove out the technology, to convince the local players that this technology makes sense for their particular application. Okay, it's a multi-year play with upfront investment. So I would say you need to be present and committed to each of these developing markets, play the long game, not the quick score. The days when you could just drop ship equipment to a developing country are gone. Okay, back to reimagining our electricity future. So this is sort of, I mentioned the transformation. This is really what we're talking about. It's not the best graphic, but it kind of gives you a sense. We have the legacy central power system. We've added the low carbon emerging technologies. They're getting power from the grid. But now we have all this stuff going on the edge, right? We have the microgrids, the solar power at the home, batteries emerging, electric vehicles. This is enabling two-way flow, network optimization, scalable load and generation at the grid edge. All of this is being mixed together. And so we need to figure out how this system works and how to successfully integrate these technologies. We do believe that baseload power options are going to continue to expand in some parts of the country. That goes back to my previous theme, which is the legacy system is not going away. Fossil fuels are not going away. They're transforming. They're starting to play a different role in this integrated electric power system of the future. I mentioned the rise of distributed power, a report that GE did a few years ago. Here's a timeline from that, and I've added a few more graphics. So let's talk a little bit about this transformation and distributed energy. So this isn't something that's new. In fact, this is how the power system started out in 1882 when Thomas Edison built the Pearl Street Station. It was a small distributed plant, and you serve local customers. There was a switch over to AC, and we were able to do central station and string up T&D lines and deliver to far-flung customers. That system took hold throughout most of the 20th century. But towards the end of the 20th century, we saw innovations in technologies. This isn't just solar improving. This is reciprocating gas engines improving. This is small aeroderivative gas turbines improving. So the smaller technologies became increasingly economic. And what we've seen in the last decade is that has accelerated. And we've also seen the emergence of even new technologies, including the digital technologies and now storage. And so this is in some ways a return to the original distributed model. It's the same, but different. Here are some numbers. These actually, I think, Bloomberg originated, but there's the battery prices on the left. So a lot of this is being driven by the technology gains. There's batteries on the left, solar PV system prices in the middle coming down 70 to 80% for both of those since just 2010. And then on the right, this is transistor manufacturing costs. So we've seen the continued march of progress on the IT side as well. And what does this enable you to do? It's the digitization. It enables you to make those technologies smart at a low cost. These are Navigant's numbers, but so we're showing over the next decade the rise of distributed energy technologies by category. And the thing I wanted to mention here is, look, so this is the delta, this is the change, total gigawatts over the next decade. Distributed solar is the largest piece. That's just solar. Storage is going to play a big role. Diesel gensets, sorry, don't forget about the fossil fuels. Microgrids, what's that? That's the combinations of these technologies integrated with a digital control system. Increasingly important. It's going to play a big role over time. And the one thing I'd say here about distributed is hybridization. So 10 years ago, we thought just about solar panels, right? But it's not just solar anymore. It's solar, battery, control system. Everything's moving toward digitally integrated and hybridized. Okay, great. I'm about out of time, and this is my last slide. So let me make these points. These are broader points about the global power transformation. The system is transforming everywhere. It's not just a North America or European thing. It's everywhere. It's just happening at different paces in different countries, and it has a different flavor because they have different needs, different resources. But this does create new opportunities for suppliers who are able to focus on these trends: digitization, decarbonization, decentralization, and electrification. Standards, platforms, approaches, none of this is fully baked. It's still in flux. There's still an opportunity to influence. All of the above, new clean technologies are going to take the lion's share of investment moving forward. They're going to account for the lion's share of capacity additions, but you're going to have to work and integrate with the legacy technologies that aren't going away. And in many cases are being improved upon, and digitization is a must. Everything needs to be digital, everything needs to be smart, everything needs to be integrated. We've seen the recent emergence of IoT. That's a big value driver as well. So there's huge value in integrating and controlling these technologies. And what I said before is you really need to localize whatever it means for you. It may not mean moving all your manufacturing overseas. It may mean just partnering and understanding these markets, but that's key to success in those markets. And then I would say creativity and flexibility are the keys moving forward. Your suppliers need to have the right technology platforms and people to successfully lead this transition. Thank you.
Yeah, Brandon, if you could, thank you so much. And if you could please keep that mic, we do have some time for questions. So raise your hands and I'll bring some back. Okay, I got one. I'll start here and then come to Vicki and then back here to Matt. Here we go. Sorry, scooting around here real quick. Thanks. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Brandon. My name is Prabir Ghosh. I run CASE Global. CASE stands for Catalyst for Accelerating Sustainable Energy, and we work a lot with emerging markets.
Hi.
So the quick question to you is, given that solar is taking a big role, what is GE doing to get into solar? Because I know you guys had invested in Prime Solar and quite a lot of investments made in the past, but you also got out of it. So can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a softball for GE. The last question I got at a conference is, what went wrong? So just start with, don't blame me. We've been talking about the transition for a long time within the company. In terms of solar, I think we've tried to figure out the right strategy there for a long time. We were in module manufacturing for a while with the Primestar acquisition. Now I think our model is solar development. We have a growing solar development business in the C&I space, where we're integrating technologies from different vendors. And so really system integrator, owning the digital platform and control system, that's where I think we're headed with our solar strategy. Okay?
Hi, Vicki Gunderson with the Department of Commerce. Can we drill down a little bit on the localization concept, and either in big markets how you segregate the market internally, because regional differentiation in India or China is important, or in the smaller markets, aggregating markets in order to justify the efforts?
The emerging markets are challenging because this was brought up before. The deal sizes are smaller. There's more deals. You're chasing more projects. And so we've just had to commit greater amount of resources on the sales and marketing side to understand those markets better and have people in country committed to those markets. So that's kind of how we've handled it in emerging markets. And this is a big trend. I mean, if you go back 20 years ago, the world was very different in terms of power equipment sales, right? There was large power plants in 5 markets. And things have really changed and they're really fragmented. And the downside of that is you have to commit a lot more resources to chase these smaller deals. That's what we're doing in the emerging markets. In the conventional sort of developed markets, Our strategy has just been, you have to understand the regional differences and the regional policies, whether that's state or local policies, and really do that analysis at a very granular level to understand what the opportunities are. So I guess in some ways it's the same, but in this new world, there's a lot more resources going into sales and marketing and understanding these geographies.
Great, thank you so much. We have one question here and then one here.
Yes, Matt Oganowski from USAID. Thank you very much. That was a very informative presentation. My question is, Brandon, you emphasized localization and digitization. And I was wondering if you could offer your thoughts, because I think it might be useful for our participants here, on doing some of that. What you called for is obviously easier if you're a very large firm, and some medium-sized, smaller firms might find that somewhat challenging. So I was wondering if you could, give some thoughts on what advice you would give if you're a medium firm that wants to access these markets and adopt those strategies, but may not have, quite the resources of a much larger multinational. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, and I realize a lot of this is, these are sort of luxury items that GE and other large players can do, but I do think that even the small players need to commit to these markets and understand these markets, so some sort of local presence, at a minimum, a local partnership to understand the markets, and a lot more focus on intelligence, whether it's market intelligence, policy, just really familiarizing yourself with the prevailing winds in each of those geographies.
Great, thank you. Time for maybe one or two more questions, so here.
Yeah. Hi, Brandon. My name is Nadia Sharon. I'm with Apt Associates. I'm going to go back to the same question about localization, but through a different angle. So when we talk about localization, there's a challenge, because if the policies and the regulations don't ensure that there is, for example, continuous auctions committed at the government level on wind, solar, and so forth, it is very challenging for medium-sized companies or for big, large multinationals to really implement factories there and really provide this huge investment. For example, in Brazil, how did GE come about in 2008 when there was the first 2010 when there was the first renewable energy auction solely dedicated for wind, and there was a requirement for national content in order to get to the local BNDES financing. And my second question relates to the local partners, because oftentimes, especially in emerging markets, there is there's a lot of segregated, multiple local partners, but not necessarily as sophisticated and that have the same long-term objectives as a large multinational. And oftentimes, if there are a few of them, they're already very much, everyone wants to go with those, so it makes it even much more challenging. So how do you go about to figure out what is the best partner to team up with in those cases? So it's two.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let me see if I can remember those. So the first one is about Brazil and sort of staying power and how do you partner. We were already in Brazil, so when the auction started, we already had a presence there. We did do some local partnering with some technology suppliers, but this was, and again, this is more of a large multinational thing. We had a research center there, we had manufacturing there, and so we were already a presence there. And so I would challenge the smaller suppliers. I'd just say, look, it's hard. Okay, it's hard. So, make a punch list, pick 3 to 5 countries that look good over the long term, and commit in some way to localize. Open up shop locally, do some manufacturing if you can, but find that local manufacturing partner. It takes a lot of research, but also boots on the ground to understand who the right partners are, because things are different than they look on paper. And there's no substitute for that local knowledge. There's no substitute for the local presence and some of that longevity. But there's obviously a risk to these markets. There's a risk to all of this stuff. And so I think you just need to kind of, make your priority list and figure out ways to start to enter those markets and get smarter about those markets and smarter about the players, which is what we've done in Brazil. The second part, did I answer your second part of your question, or? Yeah, okay.
Great. With that, let's have another round of applause for Brandon. That was fantastic. Thank you so much.